Right, welcome live from our studios in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. Thank you for tuning in. You're watching The Week Ahead with myself, Liesl Wilson. Let's get straight into it. Our President Cyril Ramaphosa postpones an official visit to Saudi Arabia to focus on government's intervention in the devastating floods in KwaZulu-Natal. Other news, the National Institute for Communicable Diseases has recorded 1,206 new COVID-19 infections. And further afield, Pope Francis implicitly criticizes Russia for dragging the country into what he calls a cruel and senseless conflict. All right, those will look at your headlines. Let's get straight into our stories on the week ahead. Government mortuaries in Durban are reportedly full following deaths caused by the recent floods. It is reported that there is a major backlog in conducting post-mortems. This may cause a delay in burials. SABC reporter Bongani Gema brings us more.
These reports have been making rounds of a backlog as government mortuaries here in Durban. As you know, this follows the torrential rains that claimed almost 400 lives here in the province. Now, these reports have not yet been confirmed by government. We are in the process of trying to get a representative from government here in the province to confirm the full mortuaries that have been reported. By joining me now, I have Muzi Hlengwa, who is the chairperson of NAFUPA SA, an organization representing funeral service providers here in KwaZulu-Natal. Sir, thank you very much for your time. Firstly, just confirm to us the reports that government mortuaries are now facing a backlog.
Yes, indeed, they are facing a backlog. In fact, I had spoken to the management at different mortuaries, and obviously we would expect them to have this backlog simply because they are low on capacity. From time to time, they will be facing an overcrowding of bodies. And this time, when you're looking at more than almost 400 bodies, and it's very unlikely that they won't be undercapacitated at this point in time.
Now, reports now, we know it has been confirmed that close to 400 people have died since the flooding. Maybe speak to us about the impacts that your industry has suffered.
Yeah, in fact, when you have such a high number of bodies coming in, and for now, not a single of those bodies has been released yet. It says to us we will have a backlog of 2 weeks in bodies. Hence, we are already going to be getting our normal weekly bodies, that are coming in. We as the industry have advised that if need be, they should try and maybe skip pause more on some bodies that are clearly identified as those who have died in flood, because it's very often we will find that bodies will just be observed and released. But if it's a legal issue, then there's nothing we can do. That's what we are saying. The government mortuaries will try and release bodies as quickly as possible, so that we as private mortuaries can be able to offer assistance. Now, when the bodies are with them, we can't do nothing up until the bodies are released. We are here. We have made a space available, and all those whose mortuaries were maybe temporarily closed and under construction, we have spoken to the owners to speed up the process, so that when the bodies are released, they are available for these bodies to be stored.
Now, since the disaster, we have seen different corporates and top business people coming in to lend a helping hand. What is your industry going to do to assist government? Because we know that government is a bit overstretched currently.
Yeah, in fact, as an industry, we are making donations. And in terms of food parcels, in terms of clothing and furniture, we are also extending hand in terms of providing temporal shelter, like any other business. But what we cannot allow is a situation whereby a few individual companies will hijack the situation and try and play a messiah in order to market their companies. That's number one. Number two, some of them, they come under false pretense as if they are donating funerals. Meanwhile, they will be going to the government and launch claims for the work that they've done. You know that when a company offers a free funeral, they will not give you a top funeral. They will all offer the lowest minimum as much as possible, so that you as a family will say, I'm not happy with this standard of the funeral, I want something better. And they will say to you, this is what we offer, if you want more, you pay. And our suspecting bereaved families will find themselves having to pay more than they should have initially. So we are saying to members of the public, bereaved families in particular, they mustn't just go to any company that comes and say they are donating free funerals, including the well-known companies, the big or small companies, because the government has said at least the eThekwini Metro has set aside 1 billion and relief fund on this. Within that relief fund, there should be something set aside for these funerals. So there's no need for any undertaker to donate a funeral. If an undertaker really wants to donate, they should be doing that through their associations and then feature in coming up and marketing their companies in these trying times that we find ourselves in.
Thank you very much for your time, sir. Well, that was Muzi Hlengwa, the chairperson of NAFUPA SA, confirming to us that indeed government mortuaries are currently full. As you know, there's now 398 people have been confirmed dead. Scores others still missing. Maybe that number may go up to maybe over 400. Also saying that maybe to speed up the process, government can maybe consider skipping the process of postmortem so that maybe burials cannot be delayed. Back to you in studio.
All right, another news as we continue to shine a spotlight on the devastation and the impact that the floods have had in KZN. Some learners in KwaZulu-Natal will not have classrooms to return to this coming Tuesday when schools reopen after they were destroyed in the recent floods. Just last week, the department issued a circular asking parents to keep their children at home and to ask principals and government bodies to exercise extreme caution and use their own discretion to determine whether it is safe for teachers to go back to school. Perhaps for more on this, let us bring in the MEC of Education in the province, Kwazi Mshengu. A very good afternoon to you. Thank you very much for joining us here on the SABC MEC.
Good afternoon to you and to the viewers, and thanks for having us.
MEC, let's just look at the impact that these floods have had on the schooling system at large. Perhaps let's just start off with the lives that have been affected. I mean, last week there were reports that around 150 schools had been affected by the floods. And I wonder if you can quantify, the impact that it's had on the number of schools in terms of the fatalities of both staff and learners. What's emerging from those reports?
Well, it's quite devastating indeed. As we speak, we have confirmed 551 schools to have been affected by this disaster. In terms of the fatalities, confirmed it's 44 learners that have lost their lives and 1 educator. We are expecting that that number may increase depending on the bodies that continue to be found all over the affected places. But also in terms of schools, we have 17 schools which are completely inaccessible, and therefore we will find it difficult to open them on Tuesday because they are not accessible. Currently, the estimated damage is at 411 million that we are going to need in order to refurbish and restore some of the schools that have been affected.
MEC, as you mentioned, the number of fatalities could increase and the assessment of the damages is yet to be quantified fully, perhaps as we look at mop-up operations and contingency plans to be put in place. And I wonder, as you speak about schools initially having to, reopen on Tuesday, what are some of those contingency plans that are going to be put in place for the province, particularly those schools that have been disastrously affected, where children and learners are not able to go to school, perhaps even universities? Let's extend it to that education system as a whole.
Well, there are schools that have indicated that they will need mobile classrooms in order to continue with teaching and learning on Tuesday, because there are a number of classes that have been affected. The team of the Department of Education is working hard to assist with those mobile classrooms. In terms of the schools that are not accessible at all, we're looking at options of nearby schools where we can then redivert learners and educators at least to be in those schools, so that we don't completely lose all the teaching as well as the learning time. But also we have a challenge now where some of our schools are occupied by people who have been displaced by these floods. In fact, 6 of our schools in under Pinetown are fully occupied by people who have been displaced. And since yesterday up until today, we're still trying to engage with the municipality and COGTA, as well as other stakeholders, to have those people removed, so that we can then have a cleanup tomorrow and be able to start with our classes on Tuesday. There are challenges that will be brought about the damages of roads and bridges, particularly to learners who are using scholar transport, where those roads are not usable, and those learners will be affected. In fact, as it stands, the report this morning was indicating that over 271 learners will be affected come Tuesday because of the different challenges that we are facing in our schools. But we are working hard to make sure that we minimize the loss of time in terms of teaching and learning, but equally to make sure that we prioritize the safety of our learners and educators.
Well, MEC, I think one of the important elements going forward for the province, perhaps to keep everyone updated, is communication. So I think everyone will be watching closely to see, what communication comes through, particularly as we edge closer to Tuesday. But based on your assessment to date, given the needs of the pupils and learners and teachers alike, I mean, you mentioned, it's not only an issue of time, but there's also the safety element. There's also school supplies, there's feeding schemes, amongst others, that will need to be incorporated. What are some of those, plans that you've put in place to mitigate against some of these challenges? How are you going to assist as government, as the provincial government, going forward for the school year to continue as we await to see the overall damage?
We are in touch with the suppliers for NSNP, who will then have to assist us to make sure that we are able to provide feeding. We continue to feed our learners even from the very first day. So that work does continue and is led by our director, who's responsible for NSNP. We are also looking at the damage that has been caused into the teaching material, to try and replace such teaching material as speedily as we can. Obviously, that will mean that we must incur more cost in terms of that. We are also going to provide psychosocial support to the learners as well as the educators, because some of these learners would have lost their parents, would have seen things that really should not be seen by younger learners, as the case might be. So we will be putting in place those measures to make sure that we provide a comprehensive psychosocial support to our learners as well as the educators, but also to make sure that we move with speed in terms of compensating the infrastructure that has been damaged through the mobile classrooms, while we're expecting that we may be given additional funding to rehabilitate these schools so that they can at least be restored to normality.
MEC, just in conclusion, I wonder, should people want to get in touch, keep up to date with information from the department, interact with you, also provide alerts and assistance? How do they go about doing that? particularly given this week that is so crucial? People want to know, are we returning? How do we do that, etc.? How do they go about doing that?
Well, we will be putting up the emergency number on our website, but also there is a provincial command center where all information is submitted to and then redirected to various departments. But from the side of the Department of Education specifically, that number will be up in our site in about less than 2 hours from now, so that we can then make sure that there's a proper communication between us as well as the stakeholders. But again, the Premier is giving daily updates on all the issues, on comprehensive issues relating to disaster, and we'll make sure that all our reports and important announcements also do feature in the briefings by the Premier.
All right, MEC Kwazi Mshengu, thank you very much for your time. We're wishing you and your team strength as you navigate these uncharted waters. Of course, it's a difficult time for the province and the country at large, but the MEC of Education for the province of KwaZulu-Natal, Kwazi Mshengu, giving us an update on what is transpiring and unfolding regarding schooling, with the resumption of schooling, education at large. As we saw last week, the department issued a circular asking parents to keep their children at home and asking principals and various governing bodies to exercise caution, using their discretion to determine whether it's safe for teachers and learners to go back to school. We await the communication to see what the final developments are on that front. And we'll leave the conversation there. It is time for a quick break. We'll continue with more news and updates on the other side. You're watching The Week Ahead. Right, we continue with our focus on the impact the floods have had in KwaZulu-Natal. We bring in the president of the Architecture Association, the SACAP, Charles Nduku. A very good afternoon to you, Charles. Thank you for joining us. I think as we begin to look at the different factors and scenarios, having played a role in the destruction and devastation that has occurred in the province, can you perhaps walk us through what some of those factors entail, the scenarios obviously that had been added? There's obviously been talks of climate change at large in the destruction in KZN, but there are obviously also other factors that have impacted. Walk us through what those factors look like as we're speaking.
Yes, thank you very much. Good afternoon, Lizel, and good afternoon to the viewers. Thank you for speaking to me. Those issues that are relating to what is going on in KZN, which is, it's flooding of the KZN, and is created by the changes in climate change, causes by the climate change, and which is the increase in temperatures, in temperature levels, and also the rainfall, which has increased. And I think the Durban climate change strategy, before it highlighted the rise in temperatures, also the increase in the rainfall, which will be reaching a minimum of about 500 millimeters to 2065, and also to 2,100. Yes, in the future, there is an increment in rainfall, and it is actually causing that. And what happens is that because of the rain, which is too much, the soil becomes soft, and then there's a landslide, and there's an increase in soil erosion. Those are the one of the areas that are actually consequences to the climate change.
Okay, so Charles, on the back of what you've spoken about, because it's just one possible attributing factor at this point, I wonder if poor planning and poor infrastructure is also to blame. If so, how so?
Yeah, the poor infrastructure, I think, has been the the talk of debates in South Africa, there has been a lot debates around the issue of poor planning. The poor planning, which is different from the urban areas and then that of peri-urban areas. The spatial planning, which highlights inequalities as a result, because there is virtually no infrastructure in areas that are in the peri-urban area, and they are not properly planned. And as a result, the focus is in the city centers and in the urban areas, and then those areas are highly affected. I mean, you can see now that the informal settlements are highly affected by what is going on by the floods, because those areas are not placed in the correct areas. It's either they are placed or located in the low-lying areas, which is actually affected by the flight line, and because that is the information that is available within the municipalities, that certain areas are highly affected or are within the flood line, and then you need not to build anything in those areas. And unfortunately, when communities go into those spaces because of the migration, from rural areas to urban areas, that they have no information whatsoever. They just move into the area, and then the municipalities or government take time to respond and to remove people. And occurrences like this do happen because there has been no mitigation factor.
Okay, so there's obviously a broader socioeconomic chat that needs to be explored beyond this. And I wonder how we begin to look at South Africa's future and perhaps how it is linked to the state of its municipalities if you are speaking about communication issues. I ask this because obviously as we look at the various issues that come to the fore, I mean, there's obviously building standards that need to be taken into consideration given the topography of the area. We have to look at implementing robust drainage systems, improving waste management services, tackling triple threats of poverty, unemployment and inequality at large, and then also looking at the issue of housing as well, which, as we know, is then also linked to other sectors such as health management. What is your analysis on that then?
Yeah, the municipalities, there are bylaws. The bylaws are informed by research which has been done by the professionals that are actually giving information to the municipalities, and the municipalities need to be strict on those when they approve plans, and in areas that are not conducive for settlement must be avoided at all costs. And then it is the role of the municipalities that those areas are actually, the communities are prohibited from going into and to settle in those areas. Because if they settle in those areas, I mean, when the flood occurs, they're going to be affected, and then it's going to become a disaster, and then the municipality needs more money to solve the disaster, and then it becomes a reactional approach rather than a proactive approach. So the municipalities need to be robust in the implementation of the bylaws.
Well,
to avoid.
Well, Charles, numbers paint a picture, numbers tell a story, numbers can also be interpreted in different ways. And we've seen the patterns emerging. There's a growing pattern of urban settlement and continued housing issue. When we just look at the continent alone, I mean, Africa is expected to have the fastest urban growth in the world by the year 2050. And when we begin to analyze this data and use it perhaps to mitigate against some of these challenges, given the issue of migration and some of the other factors, how do we begin to reimagine the housing issue, urban settlement and migration at large? I mean, we also have to compound this with the green transition that the world is undergoing at large.
I think the data, as you say, is available. I think what municipalities and the government and the NGOs and the communities affected is to come together and draw a roadmap as to how are they going to mitigate, how are they going to deal with this issue, because the growth is there and it's going to happen. People are moving from rural areas to urban areas and looking for opportunities that are there found in urban areas, and it's ongoing. It's going to happen, and I think the government, the sooner we get ready for it, and I think we need to identify areas where the rural population will be housed in these areas, and that triggers the issue of the housing, which is usually characterized by urban sprawl, because our cities are encouraging urban sprawl. We're not talking about urban densification. We have not implemented strategies that are talking to that, because our cities are growing, outward. They're not growing vertical, and as a result, the urban sprawl, and which actually affects the issues of transportation from and to places of work. And then it's an unsustainable situation, which is it can only be arrested by proper planning with the municipalities, the government, and also the people involvement.
Okay, so Charles, in your opinion then, as we conclude this conversation, given what happened in KZN and other parts of the country, what work needs to be done to prepare for disasters from both an infrastructure and even town planning point of view, to avoid us reacting? In the same breath, what options are available to government as we're speaking, as we proceed with mop-up operations in the affected areas?
Yeah. Reaction is very expensive, and I think we need to be proactive. I think a disaster management plan needs to be put in place, and you might actually find out that this information or this data is available. All we need to do is to act on it and to implement some strategies to actually mitigate against the floods or the disaster. You're talking floods in Cape Town, in KZN, you're talking fire in Cape Town. So these disasters are there. I think we need to prepare our cities better. Disaster management plan needs to be followed, and be implemented timelessly. Thank you.
All right, Charles, thank you very much for joining us again. SACAP President Charles Nduku giving us an update on the impact that the floods have had in KwaZulu-Natal. Again, just looking at the issue of urban migration and the patterns emerging from there, perhaps the role of municipalities in mitigating against some of those challenges, implementing strategies that we can use to be proactive rather reactive. Again, Charles giving us that impact as we look at the overall factor of climate change as well as a contributing factor. Let's leave that conversation there and take a quick ad break. We'll continue with more news and updates on the other side. All right, welcome back. You are watching The Week Ahead with myself, Liesl Wilson. Search and rescue teams from outside of KwaZulu-Natal have arrived in the province to assist with search and rescue efforts where hundreds of people have been left displaced, with hundreds losing their lives as well. R1 billion has been made available to deal with the natural disaster in the province, and the government declared a provincial state of disaster in KwaZulu-Natal, where President Cyril Ramaphosa said the disaster is part of climate change. But many residents in the area blame poor infrastructure for the scale of the flooding. Perhaps for more on this, we are now joined by reporter Vusi Kumalo to give us an update on the ground. Vusi, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. It has almost been a week, since the floods took place in KwaZulu-Natal, and NGOs have descended to the area to offer assistance in various ways. Perhaps briefly bring us to speed with the developments as mopping operation continues.
Yes, the mop-up operations are underway in KwaZulu-Natal. It should be Durban, Mike.
All right, Vusi, if you can hear me, I do believe, I just want to pose the question again. We're obviously looking at the mop-up operations since, everything has transpired in this past week. Walk us through and bring us up to speed with the developments as mopping operations continue on your end.
Yes, the organizations are all in KwaZulu-Natal have been assisting a lot of people who in KwaZulu-Natal with more.
All right, we obviously are experiencing some technical difficulties there given what has transpired within the province. As soon as we rectify that, we will bring you back up to speed with our reporter Vusi Kumalo, who is stationed in KwaZulu-Natal, to give us the latest on the ground. Let's take a quick ad break and continue with more news and updates on the other side. All right, welcome back. The Week in Review continues with myself, Liesl Wilson. The South African Weather Services says people traveling across the country over the Easter weekend can expect wet weather conditions. It also said that the Eastern Cape, the Free State, KwaZulu-Natal and the Northwest were likely to experience more thunderstorms from Friday, with the risk of localized flooding and possible hail. Now, this comes at the time when emergency services, of course, continuing with the search and rescue operations in KwaZulu-Natal, where record-breaking rainfall has left a trail of destruction and over 300 people have died. Perhaps more on this, let us bring in our SABC meteorologist, Mpho Rasimpi, who's going to unpack and explain a little bit further. Mpho, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Obviously, we've been giving our viewers rolling coverage and updates since the flooding began about a week ago. And I wonder if you can contextualize what's happened to date. What led to the recent flooding in terms of the weather conditions experienced in KwaZulu-Natal and other parts of the country?
Thank you very much. First of all, we have to understand that we are in our severe thunderstorm season. That is when it happens from January towards May. Now, what happened is that we had a cut-off flow. We had an upper system, which is a trough, which is sitting over the central interior of the country. Now, the problem is that this trough, when it moved towards KwaZulu-Natal, it developed into a cut-off flow, which means that it was cut from the system, as the name says. Now, with this cut-off flow, we expect mostly torrential rain. We start a lot of rainfall that we experienced in Gauteng, Limpopo, and Mpumalanga and Free State. Yes. Now, what made the situation in KwaZulu-Natal very special is that something developed also called what we call a tropical depression, which developed over the coastline over KwaZulu-Natal. Tropical depression Isa. Now, tropical depression Isa is more of a sort of a tropical cyclone. The cyclones we've been having over Madagascar, moving towards Africa, Mozambique and Botswana, we had a similar thing. So we had a tropical depression. Now, the tropical depression is like putting fuel on already when there's already fire. Meaning that it's over the ocean. It gets intensified, it gets moisture. It's warm over the ocean, it gets moisture over the ocean, it gets intensified. And that's why we saw record-breaking rainfalls, especially over most of Gauteng. Margate got around 311 millimeters of rainfall. Meaning that, remember, they only get 60 millimeters of rainfall, 50 actually millimeters of rainfall. We call that heavy rainfall. And that is what causes most of the time flooding. Now, they got 6 times that because of that tropical cyclone Isa. Now, these conditions, they are new or they are rare in South Africa. But in most countries, they experience them. Mozambique experienced similar thing. Madagascar experienced it February. So because of that tropical Isa, that is the reason why we had so much rainfall over KwaZulu-Natal.
All right, so I want to also then look at other phenomenons that is occurring the world over and perhaps how it's impacting. You've spoken about the tropical depression, and La Nina season is also in effect. And I wonder, when is it coming to an end? What further impact can we see based on that season as well?
Okay. Let me start explaining what La Nina season is. So La Nina season is simply the southern oscillation, meaning that it occurs naturally. We have 3 types. We have the La Nina, we have the El Nino, we have the natural. We are normally affected by the natural. We have normal rainfall and normal conditions in terms of temperatures. Now we are in the La Nina season, meaning that we're expecting more rainfall than normal, and we're also expecting it to be cooler than normal. Now, the La Nina season, actually, we did predict in December that from December towards May, we're going to get above normal rainfall. But because of now, The next month is May, and we're moving into a transition period where we're going to go into winter. Now I'm expecting the La Nina to actually die down and actually become weaker, meaning that during winter, when we start getting those cold fronts over Cape Town, we're expecting it to be normal. So I'm expecting normal conditions from the winter season.
From the winter season, and perhaps as we head into winter, I mean, should South Africans be expecting more extreme weather going forward? Can we expect the current conditions that we are seeing in KwaZulu-Natal to slowly subside, or is it going to be spreading across the rest of the country? How is that looking?
Okay, I want to start by saying, I know everyone's throwing out the word climate change. And I'm not saying it's not climate change. What I'm going to say is that in most cases, climate change is a long-term thing. So we never actually want to classify or associate individual small scale, which is what we've been having as an individual small scale weather system. We don't actually normally associate them with climate change. But with that said, we have to understand that because of climate change, we do going to get most of this more frequently, and actually they're going to get more intense, you know. We like saying the weather will humble you. So I do expect more systems like this in the future, and they're going to get more intense. So we need to be prepared as a country. You know, we need to have our reaction in terms of proaction instead of reaction, in terms of knowing how to. We know areas which are flood prone. Now, if we say that level 9, level 8 warning in Gauteng is happening, we know areas which are flood prone, like Centurion, Mamelodi, Soweto. So we need to get prepared, because we know that the systems that are coming, they're going to get more intense, and they're going to come at a faster pace.
Yeah, speaking of being proactive, what are some of the signs that indicate there could be possible flooding in the area, you know, beyond the areas that you just spoke of?
It's very simple. When the South African Weather Service, which is the only entity that can actually issue a warning, when they issue a warning of disrupted rainfall or persistent rainfall at a certain area, now we can have an idea of how much rainfall is going to fall in terms of millimeters in the next 24 hours. Now, while we're doing that, we know we can tell, let's say, for example, Centurion or Mamelodi, we can tell that it takes a certain number of millimeters to fall for that area to start experiencing localized flooding. Now, if we predict that 100 millimeters will fall in Centurion, now you know that it only takes 40 millimeters for Centurion to start experiencing flooding, especially in low-lying areas like low-lying bridges. Now, for us, it will actually take the municipality to say, let's close the roads, because there's a possibility of it will get flooded over that area, because they're predicting over 50 millimeters of rainfall over that area.
Vusi, Mpho, let me wrap up this conversation by just looking at some of the safety tips you can offer people who are going on holiday, some returning. You know, we're obviously looking at people who've been affected at large by the recent floods. From a meteorologist's point of view, what are some of those safety tips that you'd like to impart today?
All right. Basically, let me start by saying towards the week that we're going to experience, we're not going to experience more rainfall. The rainfall, actually, I'm expecting tomorrow to be the last day we're going to have all this rainfall that we're seeing because of the system that is affecting us currently. Now, from Tuesday, I'm expecting it to clear up a little bit. But as you're traveling, mostly when you're traveling, we need to practice patience, especially on the road. Because of the rain, visibility will be reduced. You're not going to see as clear as you see when it's the normal day. So we need to be patient on the road. If you are planning, you got to plan ahead, meaning that if you're planning to leave at 1, leave at 12, because you know you got to be cautious on the road. Now, in terms of the flooding, there's nothing much you can say. Mostly we say stay indoors if you can. If you know that it's going to flood, it's going to rain, stay indoors so you can be safe. But what are you going to do when it's flooding and your house getting flooded? The best way to do is to actually climb to the higher position that you can get to, because you know down there the possibilities of you being swept away as a serious possibility.
Mpho, thank you for that in-depth analysis. Thank you for your time as well. Again, SABC meteorologist Mpho Rasimpi, you know, just giving us an overview of what we can expect in terms of the weather patterns that has emerged and that is emerging in South Africa at large. This is emergency services are continuing with search and rescue operations in KwaZulu-Natal, where we saw record-breaking rainfall has left a trail of destruction, as well as over 300 people who have passed away. Again, he was just explaining some of the weather phenomenon affecting people who are traveling across the country, particularly those who who are making their way in and around the country over this Easter weekend. Thank you very much, Mpho, once again for your time. From Mpho, we're going to try and reconnect to Vusi. Earlier on, we saw that search and rescue teams from outside of KwaZulu-Natal have arrived in the province to assist with search and rescue efforts. Again, as we know, hundreds of people have been left displaced, hundreds more losing their lives. R1 billion so far has been made available to deal with the natural disaster in the province, and the government has declared the province a state of disaster. We also heard from President Cyril Ramaphosa, who said the disaster is part of climate change, but many residents and experts have come out to say that in the area, they are also blaming poor infrastructure as well as for the scale of the flooding at large. Let me bring in Vusi Kumalo, who is on the ground, perhaps to give us an update on what's happening. Vusi, I do believe you're back. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. It's been almost a week since the floods took place in KwaZulu-Natal, and we've seen non-governmental organizations, having descended to the area, offering their assistance. And I wonder if you can just bring us up to speed with the developments as mopping operations continue. Perhaps also give us an indication as to where you are in the province.
Yes, good afternoon, Lizelle. Yes, indeed, the NGOs are out in full force. Actually, their operations are all in full swing currently as we speak because the flood victims are all over in KwaZulu-Natal. They've been accommodated or housed in community halls so that they can get temporary assistance, while government is also rebuilding their houses. But at the moment, many victims of the floods in KwaZulu-Natal have been left to count their losses. They've lost a number of things. They've lost their loved ones. Those ones currently do not know where to start to rebuild. And also those who have lost their loved ones do not know how to even bury their loved ones. So even those who have lost their houses, infrastructure, they do not know to how to even start to rebuild their structures that they've lost in the floods. But with me are some of the dwellers here at the Clay Estates. That's a Clay Estates informal settlement that is also nearby eThekwini municipality. Let's talk to some of the locals who have also been affected in some way. Sisicela nje sishela fushane isimo sakho wena ngesikhathi la kulina kakhulu lidliva ngomsombuluko webusuku kwakumi kanjani wena wazizwa unjani yini wayibonayo la endaweni yase Clay Estates ngaseFormen?
Igama lami nginwabisa wakwaNdozakhe umhlalo wakhona lapha eFormen. Ngesikhathi kunethe imvula kwakubi kakhulu, isimo sasisibi, sasime ngenyawo singazwa masenze njani, ugesi ugijima phansi, amanzi kuziwa izindlu, so sibe namalungu alahlekile amanensi singawatholanga. Amanye wawo sikwazile ukwahlenga njengomphakathi noma sasilimemeza udaba lokuthi sifuna ukusizwa ngabantu amaphoyisa abazomthetho abagijimayo. Akuzange kufike umuntu ngaleso sikhathi, so kwanyanzeleka njengamalungu ukuthi senze iplani sikwazi ukugijimisa labo sathi sabathola ngakusa kwalelo langa.
Okay, siyabonga kakhulu. Wena sisi kumi kanjani wena? Sezokuthiwa ngane encane wayihlengayo.
Igama lami nguyamkela wakabase. Mina bhuti kwakukubi ngoba ngavuka ekseni ngo6 mangivuka ekseni ngo6 mangithi ngihamba ngibheka ukuthi isimo sinjani. Ngabona ukuthi kuba abantu bamukile. Mangithi ngiyafika kwenye indawo ngala ngezansi kwami ngifika kuthiwa kunengane ekade ikhishwe ngo3. Qale kwakhishwa umama, kwakhishwa ubaba, ingane mangithi ngiyayibheka incane idla ko7 years ngoba ngicina sengitholile. Uma ngifika kuhlelo abantu baningi mangithi ngiyabuza ukuthi kwenze njani lengane ikhishwe nini basho ukuthi ikhishwe ngo3. Akekho ocabanga ukuthi ayihambise esibhedlela, akekho ofuna ukwenza umnyakazo. Ngasuka mina khona usisi ngangihamba ngathi mina sisi ngoba wena uthi ungavolunteer ukuthi ungihambisele lengane esibhedlela ngicela uhambe ngakhumula into engangiyigqokile. Ngahamba ngocela into yokubeletha umntwana ngoba vele engekho. Kwakhona usisi abawu2 nalo baba wayikhipha emanzini ingane. Kwaba yibona bathi bahamba nalo sisi lo ngihamba naye. Mangibuya ngabona ukuthi lento ingane ikhandi limele, ubuso ilimele, iyachecka umzimba akusakwazi ukukhuluma. Angiyazi igama ukuthi ubani, angisazi sibongo nabazali bayangibazi. Kodwa lo sisi wayiphuthumisa esibhedlela ngoba ngacela ubaba wengane yami ukuthi ngicela abathatha ngemoto ngoba ngangisibona isimo sisicayi kakhulu. Wamthatha lo sisi nobaba wengane yami bashona esibhedlela. Inhlaka leyo ingane ikwazile ubathola abazali ba esibhedlela and iyaphila namhlanje ingane.
Siyabonga kakhulu. Yes, they are both talking about saving their lives during the storms, reaching floods in KwaZulu-Natal that wreaked havoc and left a trail of destruction. That near drowning incident is of a 7-year-old, of which they were able to save him on that fateful night because they had been waiting for too long waiting for the emergency services to arrive in this area so that that child could be taken to a nearby hospital. She's saying that they were able to save her, and he's now alive. That 7-year-old is now alive thanks to the community people who were able to spring to action so that they could be able to save many other people as well, not only the 7-year-old, even other locals too who had experienced a near drowning in this area of Clay Estate informal settlement near Durban. It's back to you for now, Lizelle.
Thank you very much, Vusi Kumalo. Again, our reporter having been stationed, in the province, giving us an update of what has transpired in KZN. This is mop-up operations ensue in and around the province. Again, thank you for your time, Vusi. Let's take a look at other news now. Where on Monday, traffic volumes on the roads expected to increase as holiday makers will be making their way back home following the Easter weekend. Perhaps to give us more about the situation, and what it's been like on the roads during this weekend, ahead of the week ahead, we are going to be joined by Simon Zwane, the spokesperson for the Road Traffic Management Corporation. Simon, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Let's get straight into it as the Easter weekend is winding up. Talk to us about the situation, that what the roads have been like since people left to go on holiday, perhaps what it looks like upon their immediate return.
Yes, no, the roads were busy when people left. That is on Friday. And Saturday was fairly busy. Today, we are expecting some people to make their way back, particularly those that had gone for religious worships. And they are coming back. The roads are busy. We are concerned about reports we are receiving about low-lying bridges being flooded around Mudimulle. And we want to urge people who are driving on R101 to please come onto the N1, because the bridges along the R101 would also be affected by the flooding. There has been a multiple vehicle accident on the entry northbound near Van Buren, and which is causing a massive congestion of vehicles, and people traveling along that road should also try and find alternative routes, because that road is now congested.
All right, Simon, thank you for those updates. I wonder if we can also look at behavior and incidents. Walk us through some of the common acts of rule breaking that have been observed over this past weekend that on the road that drivers have been committing. Walk us through that.
Yeah, while the majority of people have been behaving very well, but there have been incidents where people have been really misbehaving. Up to so far, members of the National Traffic Police have arrested more than 163 motorists for drunken driving. And that's only the National Traffic Police. The Eastern Cape Traffic Police have arrested 97 people for drunken driving. And there have been also a number of people arrested for speeding, with the highest speed recorded at 198 kilometers an hour. The number of speeding offenses, although they are low this year, but they are still a big concern, because they do lead to crashes and fatalities on the roads.
All right, Simon, let's wrap up this conversation by looking at, as people return, as most holiday makers will be returning to their homes tomorrow, as law enforcement agencies, are you ready for the high volumes tomorrow? What final word of advice do you have for road users who are coming back?
Yeah, traffic officials will remain on high alert on all the routes tomorrow. And they are there even today, ensuring visible patrols on the roads, assisting those who get into trouble. But we're urging those who are coming back tomorrow to really plan their trips carefully at an hour or an hour and a half, because we know it might still be raining, and therefore drive reduced speeds as they drive back. Avoid the alternative routes. If you're coming from Durban, you need to avoid the R103, avoid R102 also in KwaZulu-Natal, avoid the R101. All those routes are notorious for potholes. And with the rains that have been experienced, those potholes will be worse and there will be new ones. So please keep on the national routes because those we know they are in a good state. But have respect for other road users and travel within acceptable speeds.
All right, Simon Zwane, thank you very much for your time again. Simon Zwane is the spokesperson for the Road Traffic Management Corporation, bringing us up to speed with what's been transpiring on South African roads as holiday makers heading back to their homes as of tomorrow. And that's where we're going to leave the show for today. As always, it's been an absolute pleasure from myself, Liesl Wilson, and the Week Ahead team. Until next time, do take care. It's goodbye for now.